What is up, guys? Welcome to episode 2 of Joe Porter Pod Chats. Still unofficial name, but Joe Porter Pod Chats podcast. I have here with me my friend Bronson Lee Norton.
That's right, Bronson Lee Norton in the house.
Yeah. Bronson is a member of the gym here, and he's also an avid hunter, and he does a lot of we did a podcast before where we talked about a lot of self-development stuff. Where we even got into doing a little bit of psilocybin mushrooms and whatnot, and how the benefits that we've both had against say bouts with anxiety, depression, and stuff like that, and how it helped our lives and our journeys. But yes, so welcome, you're wearing a Moss and Blood shirt, and tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we were actually just kind of chatting about this before, and because like you said, the last time I did anything really with my social media was the last podcast that we did, and then I just took a break. And that's been working on this new thing, Moss and Blood, which is basically starting out as an apparel company, but the whole idea is to create a funding stream for conservation. So wildlife conservation, hunting, public land initiatives and things like that. And so basically, I've just been spend the last couple months just basically getting all things in order so I can launch the company, which will hopefully be announced within the next week or so, because I've just been kind of wrapping up the website. But yeah, I got a lot of cool stuff I'm going to be doing with that. One of the projects and kind of the goals is to, obviously incorporate my philosophy of, self-improvement and, self-mastery and all these kinds of things and fitness, and integrate that into, this kind of hunting lifestyle that you don't see a lot of. A lot of people's perception of hunters is the classic
Murderers.
Elmer Fudd and murderers, and they're just out there, blasting everything that walks past them. And, with bow hunting, there's kind of been this emergence of this really cool new sub-genre of people that are just hardcore athletes that have basically been treating bow hunting as a sport.
Yeah.
And so guys like Cameron Hanes, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and Joe Rogan and all those guys kind of got me into bow hunting and the sort of aiming your fitness goals towards being a better bow hunter. And that's kind of where the idea came up for Moss and Blood. So
so when it comes to conservation, and also this is something I find that a lot of people don't connect the dots with conservation and hunters. A lot of people think that hunters and conservation are going against each other, but they're very much connected in a very positive way. So as a hunter, what's your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, hunting to me is conservation. So you get this gray sort of muddled version of conservation that is really just activism and environmentalism and environmental extremism. Whereas hunting, for example, most people probably don't know this, but most of the money for wildlife conservation, wildlife management is all funded by hunting tags. So when people go out into the woods, they're not just blasting animals, and
they release an amount of tags based on how many animals are in certain areas.
Precisely. And so that's to make sure the populations are healthy and all these different things, to make sure that we can continue to harvest wild game meat for future generations and generations to come. And so, it's just really funny, people's perceptions of hunting, because since I started posting about hunting on my Instagram, I've lost 3,000 followers.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so even today, I just laugh at it now, but today, I posted a picture of a bear that I harvested last spring, and immediately 60 followers unfollow.
Really?
And a lot of people don't know that you can actually eat bear.
Yeah.
And so they're really turned off by it, or they think that anybody who's sort of advertising a hunting lifestyle is just trophy hunting or just killing and discarding the meat.
I think a lot of people are just sensitive to seeing dead animals and stuff too.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I did the same thing way back in the day. I went hunting and I got a deer, and I posted, this is back when in the old touring days, I was in a boy band, and I posted this picture of me with this deer. And yeah, so I ended up getting a lot of negative feedback from it because it was showing a dead animal and I was standing above it smiling kind of thing, you know? And it's like, it's one of those things where it's like
the grip and grin photo.
Yeah, you're proud of the hunt. But mind you, if you go on Tinder, all the guys are holding dead fish. And so it's like,
that's you know, like I can empathize with that. And this has been like, I think, because I'm still a pretty new hunter, but it's really changed my perception being on the other side now and understanding just what goes into hunting and, you know, just the amount of work and skill and, you know, the difficulty of it all. But, you know, people just have like this huge disconnect between where they get their food from point A to B, where it's on their plate. And, you know, it's this conflict of loving animals, because like I'm an animal lover. Like, you know, I've got a dog, and, you know, I like animals, I like cats, and you know, all that kind of stuff. But it's like this internal conflict of loving animals but also wanting to eat them. And so most people are perfectly comfortable like eating steak because it's all wrapped and packaged, and they have, you know, they don't really have any idea where it comes from, and so there's not that personal
out of
connection,
sight, out of mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, having killed an animal now, a couple of them, I do understand and can empathize with the people who, although they're eating meat, they see a wild animal dead and they're like, oh, that poor creature.
Yeah.
It's like, because when you are hunting and you harvest an animal, you still get that same feeling. Like, you know, you feel for the animal, and, you know, you don't want to see it suffer. So that's where all the hard work comes in to make sure that you're killing them ethically, and they're, you know, and then you do your job as a hunter to make sure that none of the meat goes to waste and all these kind of things. And so having this whole lifestyle change is just, now I look at food, all food, in a completely different way. Not just meat, but even just where vegetables come from, you know? Yeah. So, you know, when I have a plate full of veggies on my plate, it's like somebody in Mexico slaved over that for, you know, pennies to get that food, and then it gets transported and the truckers drive it here, and we get it on our plate, and it makes you just do a full 360-degree look at where all your food and all your resources come from. Yeah,
for me, when I went and shot the deer, it was actually kind of almost important to me that I did that. Just because as like a bodybuilder, you eat a lot of chicken. You just eat a lot of meat in general. So I, again, like you brought up the Joe Rogan podcast, I was like big into that when I was younger. And when he got into like bow hunting and whatnot and started talking about hunting, I started kind of understanding that more and being like, I felt like the disconnect between what was on my plate and like, and whatnot. And I felt like, hey, it would be awesome to go hunt. And then when I did do that, and I ended up shooting a deer, and we ended up skinning the deer and getting the meat off of it. And like, even when after I shot the deer, while we were like gutting it and whatnot, there was like crashing in the bushes around, and so we had to have one person that was like watching out for, like, in the area that I was, we were watching
bears
for wolves
or
or
another
lions. Bear or a mountain lion, right? So you have to watch out for that. Like, when you're in the mountains and you're hunting, it's like you realize that you're an ant. Right? You're not where you're, like, it's like a human in the ocean. You're not supposed to survive there.
No.
A single human going into the mountains you're not supposed to be there.
No.
Like, it's survival of the fittest there. And like, when you go hunting, you're putting yourself also in that vulnerable position of being out there. And having to survive and whatnot. But I mean, there's different methods of doing it. But like, when I went out, it's like we hiked into the mountains and whatnot.
Yeah,
right?
backcountry hunting, and yeah, it's I completely had the same experience, because I had known a couple buddies that hunted, but nobody bow hunted, and no rifle hunter wants to hunt with a bow hunter, because they have to watch you blow a stock from 40 yards that they could have got at 250, 300 yards. So like, that first time when you're kind of like walking down these little bear tunnels in the forest at like, 5 a.m, and it's pretty much pitch black, and you're following the game trails, And who else is following the game trails at 5 a.m? It's all the predator animals that are looking for deer at the same time as you are. So you suddenly realize just how fleshy you are.
Yeah.
You know, like it's a really interesting experience because you're suddenly both predator and prey for the first time.
You're a part of nature.
Exactly.
Yeah, like you're not in this like weird concrete jungle that we've created where everything is safe for us. You're in the elements where like literally anything could happen. That's one thing. Like living in BC, which you and I both do. Just going for a hike here, it happens all the time. Even by the river, which is like surrounded by roads, just down the street from us here. There's been cougar sightings and bears just run across the path where there's like women, children, seniors, everything just walking on like a recreational path, and the animals are just going down the river to see if they can get a salmon.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's how close we are to nature where we live. So it's like, and people panic. Like I've been on long hikes before, and I'm in the middle of nowhere and with like a 40-pound pack on my back.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there's a bear 20 feet in front of me.
Yeah.
I went camping once, and I actually had 2 dogs with me. So I had one dog, which the one that I still have, which is like an English Staffordshire, so like a miniature pit bull. And then I had another one that's a Timberwolf. It was a Timberwolf Husky Shepherd. And with like yellow eyes, had wolf eyes, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And it started growling in like early morning, like it was just getting light out. And then he started barking, and I jumped out of the tent. It was pouring rain, and there was a bear walking towards me, like 30 feet away from me, just coming to check out the camp.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's pretty crazy how vulnerable you feel in those situations. And it's not like most people would freak out in that situation, but like they're not necessarily hunting you.
No.
They're coming to check out the situation. They're curious as well.
I know what spooked them. Or
but you're in their area.
Yeah.
Like you're out of place. Like we just have this entitlement as human beings that this is our place.
Yeah, it's crazy too when you have those up close encounters with no barriers, because like people go to the zoo and they like they see bears and mountain lions and stuff on TV and there's no emotional response to it, right? It's just like, oh, it's just a little bear doing his thing. But it's like when you are like 10 feet from a bear,
the bear could fuck you up.
And the bear could fuck you up. And he's got giant teeth and giant claws and stands on his hind legs. And, he's 7 or 8 feet tall or whatever, 6 feet tall, I guess, if it's a black bear.
Yeah.
Like it just, one, they look way bigger.
Yeah.
And 2, it's just like you were saying, it's like you realize just how weak human beings are as an animal. And so that's why we have to do all these things to make ourselves more efficient, more dangerous. We use weapons, we work out and do all these different things. But it's really interesting though, as you get more exposure, how that feeling kind of goes away. Yeah. And that kind of ties into some of this personal development stuff you and I enjoy talking about, because that exposure to fear or exposure to challenges, like almost any other situation, just makes you more resilient to and more intelligent in those situations as well. Like for example, like at the very beginning, when I first started hunting, like, it's pretty nerve wracking, like walking through the bush at 5 a.m. and it's dark, there's other animals around. It's like, dude, once you've been like 10 feet with your arrow full draw at a bear and there's no barriers between you, it's like walking down trails is a breeze. And, you learn that you learn to recognize their behavior and it's interesting. It's like it's just exposure. It makes you stronger.
It makes you more calm. I find that like the more exposure you have to things that you're scared of, I mean, the less you are scared of them, because you see how, like, for me, like when the first time I ever saw a bear on a trail, I was with my brother. We were riding bikes, but like we rode our bikes so fast in the other direction and just so scared that it was chasing us. Like in our minds, I don't think it was chasing us, but in our minds, we heard all the trees falling down behind us. Like we thought we were gonna die. But like the more time it goes, like the more camping I did, the more time I spent. Like I like going out into the mountains by myself, and I've been doing that. And like the more I did it, the more calm I got about it, and the more I got into almost like a meditative state towards it. Like when I was in the mountains by myself. But when you come across those things, like any type of like natural blizzard, like a blizzard or a storm while you're out there by yourself. It's like you're scared, and the more you do it, like you said, you just get like resilient to it. But I think it's just like the calming of the mind, you know, and it's like you can think better. Like you don't have that like adrenaline rush or that rush of fear that you normally would have when it comes to it. So you're able to actually think clearly, being like, and it puts you in like a really cool spot where you can actually like navigate the situation much better than a lot of other people can who haven't put themselves in those positions. It's like, but that goes for the same thing for whether you're hunting, whether you open your own business, like
doing
cold
plunges. Like, what's the whole idea behind doing a cold plunge? Is to be able to calm your breathing in a situation where an incredible amount of stress is suddenly being inflicted on your body. Or heat is the same thing. You know, like if you're in a, you know, like a traditional sweat lodge ceremony, it gets up to 300 degrees. You can't breathe. It's so suffocatingly hot. And you just got to center yourself and like calm your mind, and you become more resilient in those situations.
Funny story. That the bear that was coming up on my camp the one time, I actually have a really good friend. He's actually a member of the gym here too. His name is Matt, but he's been published in books for like some of the hikes that he's done.
Oh, crazy.
And some of the hikes he's had like boulders fall on his ankle, and he broke his ankle on one of the hikes when he was at the top of a mountain. Like pretty crazy stuff. Like I tried to go hiking with him once. I couldn't keep up, but he was just like, I told him about a couple times where I'd come across like bears, and he's like, man, he's like, everybody carries like these like bangers with them. He's like, you're more likely to make the bear run towards you if you do that. He's like, just start walking towards the bear, clapping in the air, make yourself look really big, and start yelling at it, "Bye, bear."
Yeah.
So when that bear was approaching my tent, I was literally in my boxers. It's pouring rain. It's like I had a pocket knife and it was in my hand, but I was like clapping, just being like, "Bye, bear." Just like yelling at this bear. It just like looked at me being like, the fuck is this guy?
Yeah.
Just like turned around and walked away.
Was it a black bear? Or?
Yeah, it was a black bear.
Yeah.
But what I didn't realize is like I was camping up like the Chilliwack Lake Road area kind of thing, and there's actually an area up there where they take all the roadkill that they find, and they have like a roadkill dump,
like a stash
up there.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that I was only like 5 minutes away from it.
Oh shit!
So of course there's gonna be bears.
Yeah.
Right. So
funny thing about black bears though is it's a lot of the fear about black bears specifically is just driven by like people's misunderstanding of like the animal. Like this, I mean, it's like, oh, it's a bear. It's like it's gonna maul me in any situation that I'm within arm's reach of this bear.
Drop,
like,
stop, and roll.
Yeah, exactly. But like black bears specifically are the scaredy cat of the woods. Like that's the cool thing about hunting. And one of the cool things just specifically about hunting bears is you actually get to observe their movements in their natural environment, which most people never really get to do that. And then if you do have success in harvesting one, it's really cool to be able to just put your hands on a predator animal like that. Yeah. Where in any other scenario, you'd never be able to do that if you weren't a hunter. Like you don't get to pet bears, you know? No. Yeah. And you get to feel their hair and like their claws and, you know, examine their teeth and all these other things that you just, I don't know. There's just so much to be gained from the great outdoors, whether it's like hunting or camping or, you know, hiking or whatever. Yeah. I'm super passionate about it.
I have just a great respect for it just because like I can't spend like, you put me like, fine, give me a sweater and some sweatpants, put me in the middle of the forest. I won't last 24 hours.
No.
You know what I mean? And these animals live out there.
Yeah.
Like we don't even think about that they're like the leading cause of like death of like any types of like deer animals in the woods is starvation, cold. You know, it's like they don't have fun lives. No. You know what I mean? But I think that what I was gonna say before that was is when the more time that I've spent in the woods, the more respect that I gain for it, for the animals, for the views, for the quiet, you go out there, you lose reception, and you're completely disconnected from the world. Like that's what I love the most about camping, or hiking or anything like that. It's like I lost the love of going to like a provincial park and camping and having like that picnic table there and having the fire pit and the nicely groomed area to put your tent down. It's like I kind of fell in love with like loading a pack with the bare minimum. Have a little stove that's like no bigger than your fist, and you take like minimal food out there, and you'd be like, I'm going out for 3 days. And it's like, you're not bringing a football with you. You're not bringing your friends, and you're not bringing a cooler full of beer. You're forced into this position where you are in nature, which is, I think, is where we're intended to spend most of our time anyway, just as human beings. I mean, we've evolved into having like cities, and we've evolved skills and whatnot. But you get to this like meditative state when you're out there, being like, the amount of times in the first day that I'll go to look at my phone is like, every time I look at it, I'm like, oh, I don't even have reception. Like, what am I going to look at? Maybe I'll take a couple pictures with my phone. But my phone becomes completely useless as a phone and becomes a camera.
It's interesting, too, when you notice those impulses, because it exposes all those impulses.
Yeah.
You know, like that phone thing, for example. It's like, I 100% get that. So I need to have like a conscious plan around my phone now. Because yeah, like if I've been spending too much time on my phone, it's just they're designed so perfectly and efficiently to make you addicted to even just the movements are so fast. Like, you know, like for example, before coming to this podcast, I made sure that I put my phone down for at least like an hour to allow my eyes to rest and my brain to rest, because just that constant cycling through the apps is exhausting. And our brains aren't supposed to function as quickly as these machines can. And so, you know, like when you get out into the woods like that, it's just, you actually get to connect with yourself and like, what do I really think and feel right now, and all that kind of stuff. Because 24/7, like whether it's like the buzzing in your building of the Wi-Fi in the background, or constant notifications on your phone, or, you know, people coming in and out of your office if you're at work, whatever. Like I think it's important that people make time to actually connect with nature. And it doesn't have to be the way that I do it, because not everybody wants to go running around the woods trying to shoot animals. But just having time away from modernity is so important. Because like you said, I think it makes us really weak and really anxious, because we're over socialized, but lack the exposure to like real hardship.
Yeah. For me, when it comes to my phone, especially lately with everything that's going on in Canada right now, and I was playing advocate for keeping the gyms open and whatnot, and I was being very vocal about it. But then it made people think that I was this person to send everything political to. That shit stresses me out. Like I'm not a political person. Like I can see when something bad is happening, and I think that I have a good eye for like, hey, this is wrong. Like what's happening is wrong. Especially when you start shutting down gyms and places for people to go and get fit, and you're keeping McDonald's open, right? Like you're keeping the things that are keeping people sick open, and then anything that makes someone better mentally, physically, boost their immune system, everything is you're closing. It's like that to me, it's like that's blatantly wrong. Like the science behind that decision is wrong. So I would get behind that, but like I have to disconnect from my phone often now, because it's like my phone, just because of all the stuff like with Operation Green Light and all the stuff in Ottawa, my phone picked up that I was being active with all this kind of stuff. So, and then the people that were following me also picked up that was my stance on it. So every single post that comes up on my feed is politically based, and it stresses me out. So it's like I have to constantly like I was on my phone when you got to the gym here, but it's like when I'm on it, it's like I see a lot of the times I'll see those posts that are coming up, and I'm like, that's my sign. Like if I see something political come up that I know is just gonna kind of like trigger me, like something bad that's happening in Canada, which mostly is bad happening in Canada right now, is like I just shut the app. Right. And so that's what I really have always loved about the hiking too, is like it's you reach that point where you're like nothing matters. Like when you're out in the woods by yourself, and like you don't even have to have a fire, just sit in the middle of the forest and look at your phone. There's no reception. There's nothing your phone can do. There's no power to charge it. Your phone's gonna die. Right. It's like,
well, that's kind of the, you know, I was doing that a lot at the very beginning of the pandemic, because when you go outdoors and you go far enough outdoors that you don't have access to any of those things, coronavirus doesn't exist out there.
No.
Like, coronavirus doesn't exist in the wild.
No.
You know, it's not in your face. And so, you know, like you were saying, I had to do the same thing. What I do is I usually will just delete apps unless I'm posting something. And so I've gotten pretty good, not all the time, but I've gotten pretty good at not consuming, or at least not consuming as much as I'm producing. And so if I'm not producing very much, well, then I better not be on there too much. You know, I turn off all notifications.
Yeah.
So at least if there's somebody that I want to talk to, or if there's a, you know, whatever group of guys that I want to find out what's going on with them, it's my conscious decision, but not this, you know, impulse to just constantly be in there. Like, the only thing I keep open basically is Telegram. No notifications on there, but it's the same thing with you. Like, every time I open it up, it's like convoy news. And it's like, you know, that's a dangerous thing to get sucked into too, is you know, like, obviously you keeping your gym open is a real stand. You know what I mean? It's tangible. It's something that actually makes a difference. You allow people to work out, get healthier, you know, improve their mental health and all these other things. And you said no to that. But, you know, like, there's also just the anger porn aspect of it, where it's just, this tragedy is happening, you know, this person is, you know, imposing their will on this group of people, but, like, there's no follow-up, there's no solution. Right. And that's where it gets slippery, because I feel like everyone's in that state right now. And part of that is because, and I think part of the reason you get sucked into that conversation is because for so long, so many people felt that way, and there was very few people who were vocal about it publicly that could empathize with them and basically give them permission to also, you know, express their views about how things were going on in Canada.
No, I totally agree. It's amazing. Like, when you're a person who all of a sudden publicly speaks up and you're just like, no, like, this is wrong. And then it gives everyone else permission. You know what I mean? Which is great. Like, that's how we're going to see change in our country or whatever, is when everybody stops, like, bitching and complaining online and actually does something about it. You know, it's like that for me, it's like what you're saying with the anger porn kind of thing. It's like the amount of people who I just see, like, the posts and the sending messages and just enraged. Like, the messages that I get are like, these dickheads are, like, doing this now, and I'm like, well, what are you doing about it besides just, like, bitching on social media? Like, that does nothing.
Just reposting spicy memes. Like, if your political position is just memes, right?
I post the ones that are funny.
There are funny ones. Don't get me wrong. Like, memes are one of the best things to get from the internet. But there's just, like, there's ones that are just more mean than they are funny, and they just get recycled over and over and over and over again. You know, it just, I don't know. Like, I was super vocal about all this stuff from the beginning, and over the last, you know, couple months, I was just like, you know, I need to focus on things at, like, an actual community level that I have control over, because if I get my head all twisted up and I get all pissed off and depressed, it's like, you're not doing anything for anyone. No, you're not doing anything for everyone. You're just adding more poison into the world. Whereas, you know, like, what are some small things that you can do that actually make a difference? I mean, support businesses like yours, or like Local Harvest, who don't require masks. You know, like, I don't go to Save-On anymore because they got fucking COVID security there, and, you know, 14-year-old mask Nazis telling you to wear a mask every time as soon as you get into the store. So, like, great, like, I can actually go support this business. Or there's also I can't remember their name, but there's a dairy farm that's local where it's like, okay, I got to go to 6 different places to get my groceries, but, like, I'm supporting people who are not discriminating against anybody, and that's something you can do. And most of those places are small. Like, Save-On Foods doesn't give a fuck if you don't shop there.
One grocery store that's been great so far, besides, like, Local Harvest and stuff like that, is Real Canadian Superstore. They have like the thing, the intercom come over and just says, "Please respect people who aren't wearing masks."
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't been
And
there.
they've had that since. Yeah, I've never worn a mask when I go in there, and like usually there's only like one or two people who aren't wearing masks. But yeah, I just like it's just fundamentally I just don't believe in it, and like you look at the science behind it, and the science doesn't match up. So it's like, why are we doing this? I like breathing fresh air.
Yeah.
Right. And like for me is when I get masked, as like I start feeling anxious when I am, because I feel like I'm not standing up for what I really believe in. Like if I'm going around not like every once in a while I'll throw one on being like, okay, I just don't want to deal with anything. And like I'll throw one on and I'll go in somewhere.
Just don't even want to have this
conversation. And I know that I'm only going to have to wear it for like 5 minutes, but like I've gone like people are so scared to take off their masks now because of that criticism. And it's like I went into a mall in Surrey yesterday, and I was just walking around, and like one of the stores that I went into, the guy was like, "Oh, can you put on your mask?" And I was like, "No, I'm okay, thank you." And I just kept walking. He didn't say anything after. And then he came up to me probably 5 minutes later when I was looking at some stuff, and he's like, "Hey, man," he's like, "How do you go about like just being able to take off your mask and walk around?" And he's like, "When you responded to me, I didn't even know what to say." I was like, "There's no law that says I have to wear a mask. That you can't."
And you know why that works though? And I do the same thing. You're polite to people.
Yeah.
You know, like here's the thing, like what a lot of people will do is, you know, they're obviously angry that they're being told what to do. But when you walk around the store and you're videotaping yourself being like, no fucking mask, this and that, and you're in a public place, it's like, I agree with that person, but they're kind of being a dickhead.
They're being a showboat.
Right. And so for, you know, like it is amazing how much you can get away with that stuff by like just being nice to people. I going to the butcher the other day, like I don't say anything, you know, I don't make a scene about it. Like I am super polite when I go in there, and, you know, I try to strike up conversation. Like, oh, this guy's just a normal dude. He's not like some psychotic QAnon who's going to burn my business down if I say anything to him, right?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I mean, I think the fact is that most people are done with it. Like most people are done with it. And they're just like, what we've bred in Canada, especially Canada, I would even venture to say that in the U.S. as well. But Canada, I'll speak about Canada just because this is where I've grown up. We've breeded a whole bunch of pussies, right? Like people don't stand up for themselves. They're so used to just taking to social media to let out any form of frustration that they have, which is incredibly toxic, right? You're not having conversations with people anymore. You're not having to go face to face. It's like it's like,
also limited to like a certain number of characters, and there's a certain context of the way people talk on certain platforms.
No one's getting punched in the mouth anymore.
Exactly.
They're not there to get punched in the mouth. And it's like, it gives people this freedom, but it's like
it's the illusion of freedom.
Yeah. And it's so fucking toxic. And it's like, there's just so many pussies that aren't able to just be like, you know what, I'm just not going to wear my mask anymore. Nobody wants to. The moment that the mask mandate came down the first time, the moment they said you don't have to wear a mask anymore, I didn't see one person wearing a mask.
No.
And the moment they said do it, it's people are afraid of criticism.
So how silly is that too, right? You know, like one day there's a deadly virus, the next day there's not a deadly virus, and then 2 weeks later there's a deadly virus again, and it's just like I had that same experience because I went into the stores. It was like a week in the summertime where they just let everyone be free for a few days. Yeah. And it was like normal again. Yeah. But as soon as the government started telling people what to do again, all of a sudden, all of the regime snitches come back and are, you know, trying to crack down on you. Just, you know, it's like, it's not police that are enforcing this in most places in Canada, aside from Ottawa and the borders. It's the community is enforcing this. Yeah. It's other people. It's like 15-year-old baristas that are enforcing this kind of stuff. So when you start thinking about that,
and asking you for your medical information.
Yeah.
It's like, that's what blows my mind is like the cops that have come forward about this, or the police officers, RCMP that have come forward about it, is like, in order for even a police officer to ask you for your medical information, there's a massive process that has to happen for them to do that. And it's not easy. Like, getting your medical information is probably one of the hardest things they can do to getting information about you. But now we have 16-year-old hostesses that need to seat you at a restaurant that are asking for them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like,
and that sucks for them too. Like they don't want to do that.
No.
Why on earth would a 16-year-old girl want to have to deal with like a disgruntled customer who doesn't want to?
No.
What doesn't want to do that, right?
But the thing is same as the mask. The moment they say that we don't have to do this anymore, it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
The moment they bring the mask down, you won't see one.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe the odd person, but like I know that us on the western side of Canada, we're a lot more conservative than the east side. Mm-hmm. And the east side controls most of the politics here. Mm-hmm. So it's like it's crazy when you see like all the protest convoys that are happening. It's like I was in one today, and like tens of thousands of vehicles.
Yeah.
Like just flags everywhere, and just like. Most people that are driving by are honking, giving the thumbs up, waving out their windows. And then you just get the odd dickhead who's just like honks and gives you the middle finger kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's like, and what they get back is they're not met with hostility. Mm-hmm. They're met with people wave back at them.
Yeah.
Like I had a lady throwing up.
That's way worse because it exposes your character flaw.
Yeah.
And you know what's interesting though, man, is like, I've thought about this a lot because I try not to, but I do have a bit of resentment towards, you know, like I'm so happy that the everything is shifting in the country as far as like public perception goes and what polling and all this kind of stuff, which is insane that we make decisions based off polls.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's kind of just comes back to like that herd mentality of like, is this socially acceptable yet? And now that freedom is popular, 2/3 of the country want this to be over. But when freedom wasn't popular, you would have been standing on that overpass like 6 months ago, you wouldn't be getting 15 fingers. Yeah. You know? Like, for example, my partner, who goes to the gym as well, she went to a protest in Kelowna in the summertime. And just, you wouldn't believe, like, the lack of support from the public. People just driving by, like, everyone fingering everyone in the crowd. And it's like, I don't know. It's just it's interesting to observe human nature, and it also makes you really value like the minority of people who really do have the awareness to think for themselves and see when things are not right, and then making decisions based on that, even if it's not popular. Like your gym, for example, like you never discriminate against anybody or even asked about it from the beginning, right? And so it's it's just interesting to see like whether it's for this or against that, how much of it has nothing to do with the scientific facts or the numbers that they actually are putting out and this kind of stuff. It's like it's just based on whether or not it's socially acceptable to the group. Yeah,
and it's kind of like what you said with like the people. Some people are just so opinionated by it, and they want to take the side, and I don't think that they have bad intentions by it. Like people in the public who are trying to like say things to people, being like, "Oh, you have to be wearing your mask," because they're scared. It's like that fear is real, but it's also it's fear by design, right? Like we've been designed to watch the media in Canada, and then the media has been paid off, and then they have their own narrative, right? And nobody's watching the news stations and everything that are actually speaking the truth and obviously speaking the truth, right? And you can see videos that match up with their statements, and whereas in like things like CNN in Canada, it's just
CBC's actual like false information now about their reporting on specifically stuff that's going on in Ottawa. Yeah, it's funny that you brought that up because it's actually something I was talking about today. Was about. Lost my thought.
What I was saying with it was like, it's people like I have yet to meet people who are very introspective and do a lot of self work and who have been through. I shouldn't say been through a lot of struggle, because a lot of people have been through a lot of struggle, and I don't want to like minimize what people have been through, but like I know you and I know the self work that you do, and I've never had to ask you what side you stand on. I know so many business owners in town, and I've never had to ask them what side they stand on. Mm-hmm. It's like, I know that they've done this work, and I know that they're intelligent human beings, and I know that if something gets brought to their attention, they're not just going to be like, agree with it. They're going to do a little bit of work to see, hey, you know what, or something seems off about this, so I'm going to look at the other side of the story. Mm-hmm. And it's like back to what we're saying about how like Canada is just like bred pussies for the last like 20 years is like, it's insane because like you look at like some of the things that people are believing now and things they're standing for. It's like, you don't have a moral backbone. Mm-mm. Like you don't have any backbone. You know, it's like you don't have any, like you're so happy in your comfortable little world of not having to worry about anything in Canada that you're literally handing over your freedom.
And I think this is what I was going to say. Collected my thoughts there. So this is why, even with new information coming out about, because for so long they were promoting all this stuff about, oh, this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated and all this stuff. I looked at the numbers just the other day for BC, for example. 74% of cases in BC were people with 3 shots, and 69% of people in BC in the ICU had 3 shots.
Yeah.
And so you could try and explain this to someone, but they're still married to, the propaganda that they've been taking in all for all these months. And so I think a big aspect of it though is kind of what you're saying about people who've done work on themselves versus people who haven't done work on themselves. And like one thing that this pandemic has allowed people to do is to justify the ways that they've been living their lives all along. Like people who are, terrified to go out in public, even though, you're like a healthy or semi-healthy 28-year-old male, and, you're wearing a mask while you're walking your dog, or, you don't want businesses to open up, or you want lockdowns, or you want mandates. It's like all of this pandemic has done for those people is allowed them to just justify like this, weak, way that they've been living for however many years. And if things go back to normal, those people have to face their lives again. They're not a protected class anymore. They don't have any special privileges. You don't get to go to Earl's, and your, anti-vax buddy doesn't get to go to Earl's, and all these little things that have allowed people to feel, and it's kind of sad. It's like
second-class citizens.
Yeah. And so this group of people doesn't want things to go back to improve, And so it's interesting, like people who are really into athletics or people who own gyms, those are all people who generally feel responsible for their health.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not surprising to me that gyms are some of the first places to start to say no to mandates.
Yeah.
Because it's full of people who realize that their health is their own responsibility.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I just find the whole thing insane, like the situation. Like, so in BC, we were just allowed to, they opened up the gyms, they opened up the bars and the clubs and whatnot. You're allowed to go 100% capacity now. You're allowed dancing now all of a sudden. You're allowed, as long as you're still wearing a mask. Night 1, my buddy owns a bar here and I follow him. And I've been trying to get him to, I just throw the odd thing out there being like, hey, you should really start being like, you should lead this like movement of bars and stuff. But for restaurants and bars, it's just such a different thing because like their liquor licenses get revoked and then they're in big trouble, right? It's like, cause that's where they make most of their money. But it's like, they're like night 1 of them being allowed to open up full capacity with dancing, but everybody has to wear a mask, not one mask.
Yeah.
And everybody was just having the best time of their lives. Yeah. Like I watched the videos of it online, and I'm actually surprised that I even saw the bar like publicly post it where not one person was wearing a mask. It's like, and how are you supposed to control it in that situation anyway? Right? It's like you're gonna have to hire like 10 times the amount of bouncers, and then you're gonna end up kicking out 100% of the people that are there, and then you're back to like not allowing anybody into your bar. But
how good is it to see people like enjoying themselves though?
Fuck yeah.
For the first time.
Yeah.
And how long?
2 fucking years.
Yeah. Like a lot of people don't want to see that, and it's weird to me. Like when I see people rejoicing or even like, in the first summer of all of this, I saw so many people down Chilliwack Lake Road just having a good time with their families outdoors. And this kind of comes back to like a lot of the media's influence on how people feel about all this stuff. Because I don't know if you remember, but like right at the beginning of everything, people were so nice to each other.
Yeah.
It was just a total shift, and like, man, this is pretty fucking scary. It's like, and it affects everybody.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe we should, we'll have a conversation with someone about it that we wouldn't normally stop to have a conversation. And I talked to so many people at the beginning of all that stuff where it's just, friendly dialogue, and you could tell like, you're a person too, and we're all going to be, underneath all of this. And so flash forward 2 years later, the whole planet has never been so divided, but our country specifically has never been so divided. And so to some degree, like some people are going to be less susceptible than others, but I don't necessarily blame people who have been exposed to just so much propaganda, especially if they don't have an inner circle that are also self-reliant people who can think for themselves, and you can be like, hey man, like, I don't know, this seems kind of messed up, and you can bounce ideas off of people and like, yeah, and you're at least sheltered by a tight-knit community. But like for people who have nobody, like imagine like feeling the way that you and I feel, and being surrounded by an entire group of people who are fully pro-mandate, fully pro big pharma, fully pro, mainstream media, so like I do have compassion for that too, as much as it frustrates me to no end to witness people.
Well, a lot of those people too are just like, even if they see like this, if you surround yourself with people who are just of that like one thought process, being like they agree with the mandates, they agree with everything, or they're the type of people that think these protests are like anti-vaxxers or racist or Nazis, it's like you gotta have like an independent thought. But it comes down to like, it doesn't even matter if you're watching CNN, it doesn't make sense. Like it's people that don't have that thought process, and this is where I can have a little bit of empathy for people that are like that, and who are like so stuck in their ways that they're like, they actually believe that like what like CNN and like CBC is actually like feeding them. And that's all they're watching. Yeah, it's like, but how lazy are you? Like to know like that nothing adds up. Like nothing adds up that the government's telling us. Nothing adds up what the CDC is telling us. Like nothing adds up. So when you don't even have to look at the opposite side of the story. You can do math in your own head. Yeah. Right. Like 1 + 1 doesn't equal 5.
Even with the distorted information that they are getting, it's like you can still see that there's wrong being done. Yeah. Right.
I mean, that's what set me off the most, was just like, it was my own thought process on it. It's like, okay, they're like I said at the beginning of this, like you're keeping McDonald's open, but you're shutting down the gyms. And like on the first gym closures that we had, like I was probably the last gym to shut down in BC that I am aware of. But I shut down because I was getting bullied online. Like I shut down. I wasn't mandated to shut down. Everybody was just telling me that it's my duty. And they were writing like these big like warnings about my gym. And then like I shut down and I'm looking out the window and there's 150 cars lined up in front of Dairy Queen right outside my window. I just boarded up the windows and opened back up. Yeah. And I was like, that makes no sense. I'm like, you can't keep feeding people these like foods that are making them sick and giving people cancer and giving people heart conditions, and then say close the gym down.
Exercising
is all that
is a danger to public health.
Yeah, it's garbage. Yeah. But yeah, I mean that's my stance on it, and I just think it's a very common sense, and I just feel like everybody nowadays is just like too big of pussies to stand up for themselves. And I know that there's way more people that think like us that aren't saying anything because they're surrounded by those people who are so brainwashed by like what they're being told on CNN and like the mainstream media and whatnot, right? But it's so obvious at this point, even with like the government funding that's funded the CBC and whatnot.
$600 million.
6.6, yeah, 6.6 million, 100 million.
Hundreds. Yeah, 100 million. Yeah, went to CBC, and it's like, You know, and Trudeau had even made jokes about that. You know, in some like private conference.
I saw the video. He's like, "Oh, we paid them enough."
Yeah, so they should have some media bias, and it's like, you know,
people need to wake up.
Yeah, and I don't at this point, you know, I don't really know how to sway those people because, like, it's this. I don't know what it would be like to have so much cognitive dissonance where you've adopted this false reality of how things are and how we need to operate over the last 2 years, and now it's sunk in like deep into your DNA and your psyche, and now people have to go basically in order for things to move in any kind of positive direction. People are basically going to have to admit that they bought a lie for 2 years, right?
Yeah,
and you know, the other challenge too is like people like you and me, you know, who have kind of spoken out against this stuff from the beginning. It's going to be up to that group of people to show some kind of forgiveness so we can like move forward, because it's this dilemma of like, we're so divided now, but in order for people, you know, who are pro freedom to get what they want, they're going to have to basically pretend like these people weren't trying to treat me as a second-class citizen for the last 2 years. Sure. But you need them to gain the popular opinion, because apparently all of our political decisions are based off of polls now. Yeah. So
I think that the thing, it goes back to what we were saying earlier too, is treating those people with kindness. Mm-hmm. Like when you aren't wearing masks, it's like they try to demonize people who aren't. That's just like the narrative. It's like if someone's not vaccinated, if someone's not wearing a mask, if someone's not going by the status quo that they're now like telling us that we have to do, mm-hmm. That's only momentary, because like we said, as the moment they say you don't have to wear a mask, all the masks are gone. Mm-hmm. But it's like treating the people like, if you're
Super
not wearing
Bowl,
a mask,
man, 70,000 people at Super Bowl, and you got, you know, fifth graders that are, you know, breathing their own waste still.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. And it's treating them with kindness, so they know that you're not this dickhead. Mm-hmm. You know, that you're not trying to get them sick. You're not trying to do anything. You're just going about your life because you know that it's all bullshit. And if you're kind to them and you're not saying, "Hey, fuckface, take off your mask, take off the diaper on your face."
Yeah.
It's like all these things are made from either side, from the left or the right or whatever. It's all designed to create division. Mm-hmm. You know, vaxxers, like anti-vaxxers, the left, the right. Mm-hmm. In Canada, group
identity.
It literally went in Canada overnight from being anti-COVID to like being COVID scared, of anti-vaxxers, to liberals versus conservatives, left versus right. It changed overnight. Like
how bizarre is it that that's politicized? Like the idea that you are for vaccine mandates would indicate to someone that you're left wing, and the fact that you're for making your own choices, that you're right wing. Like how bizarre is it that our medical decisions have been politicized, left and right?
But when was the last time since the truck convoy started? When was the last time you heard about COVID?
Nothing. Yeah.
Nothing.
No.
It just became for this one divisive terms. And then like our government started all of a sudden just randomly started throwing out things like
terrorism,
white supremacists, you support terrorism, you do all this kind of stuff, and like freezing people's bank accounts and all this stuff. Now it's like left versus right, liberal versus conservatives, and it's just like
everyone's forgotten like how we got here and why we got here. You know, like like you're saying, it's at this point it's not about anything anymore.
Yeah.
Right. It's purely about our government is not willing to give back the powers that we gave to them. And we have to like admit that we gave it to them as a country. Like when in history, in the last 150 years, can you think of a time where people gave up more in that short a time?
Yeah. But also nothing's happening. Well, that's the point. That's why we want our freedoms back, is because nothing's happening anymore. Like, there is no more COVID. Like, nobody's talking about it anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, we're not hearing it from Bonnie Henry. We're not hearing it from anybody. Like, the pandemic is over. Mm-hmm. Give us give us our rights back.
Yeah.
Right. But that's what you'll always see. And if a bunch of like these fucking pussies don't wake up and do some research and realize, hey, we got duped, and like put your pride down and be like, hey, and we see it every day. We see people doing it every day. It's like when you go on those convoys, they triple in size every week. More and more people are joining. More and more people have Canadian flags all over their vehicles. Yeah. Like, and it's super inspiring, and they're super positive like experiences. So what I find funny is the people who still haven't caught up to like the information that's out there now, who are still throwing up their middle fingers and whatnot. It's like they're greeted with so much positivity, and like anybody in the convoys, they're honking at each other, they're waving at each other.
Yeah. Like I went to the one at Lickman a couple times. I think a couple weeks ago, there's the first day where across the country people were organizing in support. I think it was like 3 weeks ago or something. There's a day where across the country, everyone, and man, like I haven't seen people smiling and having a good time like that, and I don't know how long. Like most of the time, the grocery store, like people are fucking miserable. Like they're tired, like they're burnt out. They're tired of this, and they're just waiting for someone to give them permission to live their lives again. And it's just Maxime Bernier had a really funny, just brief post that he made, but it was like, if vaccines work, mandates don't make any sense. If vaccines don't work, mandates still don't make any sense, right? Yeah. Because it's like, it's very strange now that it's become this weird conversation about like, we now have to protect people with 2 shots and a booster, and you and I or whoever may or may not be, vaccinated is now a threat to the people who are supposed to be protected. So it's just like everything is lost on this for me.
And I honestly think that our government and the American government they're just like grasping on straws now, because I think that for the most part, they've been very exposed. Like the last video that Fauci put out was saying, hey, this isn't the first time that vaccines have been distributed, and we realized that they created more damage than good. And
how can you say that?
And no one lost their minds. Like I watched it and I was fucking dead quiet.
Yeah.
And I was just like, 2 fucking years. And he finally says, oh, these don't do anything. Like we already knew that. But we already knew that.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I was so blown away that he even said it. And then he was like, oh yeah, he's like, there was like vaccines that we used and medications we used for like AIDS patients that actually accelerated the process. And he's like, yeah, we just stopped using them. And he was so nonchalant about it. The guy is a criminal.
Yeah.
Like I remember seeing interviews when he was getting questioned in Senate or in the hearings or whatnot.
Yeah,
where
about the gain of function research.
Yeah, he's like, can you please stop like posting this stuff, because people are threatening the life of me and my family. That's because people like him should be held accountable. People like Trudeau should be held accountable. Like back in the day when this type of treason, this type of anything was like happening, and this type of like tyranny was happening, those people got executed in public.
Well, think about this too. Like, you always hear the left talk about how you shouldn't compare this to the Holocaust, right? It's obviously an edgy thing to compare it to, and people immediately are like, "Oh, how dare you? You can't even speak about the Holocaust."
Yeah,
it's too soon. But think about this. It's like, and for everyone, like you can go find this questioning in Congress. It's all on video. It's recorded, where Fauci's admitting that they funded the gain of function research after he lied about it the first time in Congress,
and after they changed the definition of gain of function research.
Exactly. And so if this is where all of that started, 6 billion people died in the Holocaust, right?
Yeah.
You know how many people have died from coronavirus? Just shy of 6 billion people. So how is that
million, not billion.
Million, pardon me.
Million.
Pardon me. And that goes for both.
Yeah.
So why isn't that a fair comparison?
I mean, I personally am not a fan with comparisons like that, because you're looking at like someone who actually purposely gassed people into doing this, and there was an actual virus and it did kill people, but it's more, so it's not necessarily someone going out of their way to like kill people, whether it eventually gets proven that if it was like gain of function research or man-made, this virus attacked a certain population of people, right? It's like if you look at the demographics of people who were actually affected by it, it was and killed by it, there were also people that were on their way out for the most part, right? Like they all had like pre-existing things, and not saying that COVID didn't do it, but it's like they weren't in good shape. They didn't take care of their bodies. They didn't take care of certain things, and some of them had were born with just like in a really shitty situation to handle any kind of like virus like that, right? And whereas, and yeah, that's not necessarily fair, but it's like that's also like that's part of us still being human, right? It's like we're not robots, we're humans, and if we have like a genetic disposition where our body will fail if we catch this virus, then that's what happens. And like we need to keep everybody safe, and that's something I've stood behind the whole time is like, let's keep the people who are at risk safe, but the rest of us who have paid attention to our bodies and we are being safe and we are doing this, go about living, because then our economy doesn't crash. We don't have the inflation. We don't have all this kind of stuff. And then we also like, we're not giving as much power away to the government, who is clearly just desperately grasping for it.
Yeah. And, you know, like people under 65 shouldn't be wasting years of their lives. No. You know, it's already, you know, challenging enough as a young person to get ahead with all the things like you're talking about, like inflation and cost of housing and all this stuff, you know? So it's like, I don't know. You know, it's like, to me, the cure is worse than the disease. You know, we've basically focused on this one problem that we're all facing and just ignored all other problems, you know, like mental health issues, suicide rates. Like the fact that, like, you know, I'll probably leave this conversation exhausted because I'm so under socialized. Like every time I socialize with people, I'm like physically drained from it, and that's bad, man. Like people shouldn't do that. People need people.
Well, I think what's kind of funny about, and I've gathered this kind of about you as well, and it's taken me a long time to realize that I am an introvert, right? And I think that you're introverted as well, and I know that you and I both have like gone through like some struggles with like mental health stuff, and that it makes us go inward a lot of the time anyway. So it's like for me, it's the same thing. Like when I start getting stressed out on my phone, it's like I know I have to put my phone down. Like that, I know that that's a boundary I have to set for me. Is like, or I know the path that's going to take me down. I know that stress will build up and compound on each other, and then I have to go inward, and in order to get rid of it, it's like I put it down. But like I love having these conversations, but like for me, if I need to recharge, it's like I'm by myself.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's funny. It's almost like you know, it's the introverted extrovert thing, right? It's almost like socializing is more of a skill than like your personality. At least that's how it feels for me. And it might feel that way for other people too, where it's like I love people and I love socializing, but like it takes a certain amount of like effort, because, you know, like you were saying, like I'm not outwardly expressive with my thoughts. You know, even with my partner, like, you know, she's very outwardly expressive. She talks a lot. I don't speak that much because I'm constantly having that inner dialogue with myself. And so it's, I don't know. I realized that too when I started my podcast, you know, a couple years ago, and it's a good thing to get outside of that impulse to just be alone and all of the time, because there is so much to be gained from, you know, conversations like this. You know, you learn so much about people.
There's I don't know what type of music you listen to, but there's a rapper out there. His name's NF. I don't know if you listen to him a lot, but he has one line in one of his songs, and it resonated with me. It's like, I'm not in a mood to meet another stranger and talk about a bunch of things that I don't feel amazed with. You know, and that sums it up so much. Like I love sitting here having this conversation, and I thrive. Like I'll feel great after this conversation because I just had an intellectual conversation and with someone of similar beliefs, and like I know that I can learn from you. But like so many times, like when you just meet random people, it's the same conversation. Hey, how's your day? Oh yeah, just working lots.
Small talk is painful for
it's
me,
so
man.
painful.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I mean, it's part of my job, and like, I love meeting people and doing that stuff. But when it comes down to like having those conversations like 20 times a day, it's like, if I can either sit by myself or literally sit and have like a really good conversation with someone about something that has some depth to it and that has like that kind of stuff. Like, I love like the podcast that we did before where we talked about getting into mushrooms. We talked about mental health. And
I took some mushrooms before this podcast.
Did you? I ran out. Okay. I went to Whistler. I went to Whistler a couple weeks ago, and I had a big bag of mushrooms, and I left it in the hotel room.
Oh no.
It was a $180 bag of mushrooms.
Yeah, man, they're good for all kinds of things. You know, like I do kind of like a little bit of a mix of, microdose of psilocybin. I love all kinds of mushrooms. So microdose of psilocybin, reishi, just the tinctures, and then lion's mane, and a little bit of new pep which is what's it called, nootropic.
Yeah.
So that kind of like jacks my brain up and gets me moving really fast. If I talk really fast or I start stumbling on my words, that's the new pep. But the other stuff kind of like brings you back. But yeah, man, I mean, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot to be gained from, experimenting with psychedelics. Like, it's,
I don't even know if it's like, I've never hallucinated. Like, I've never done enough mushrooms, or I've I've smoked weed a handful of times, but it's like, I prefer psilocybin mushrooms. But I've only ever gone to the point where I see the colors just popping out a little bit. But I've never been like, people are like, have these crazy trips on them.
Go down the rabbit hole.
I've just never done it. And it's something that I don't like feeling out of control with. I think if I'm with people that I really trust, I would like to go down that rabbit hole a little bit. But like, I get such a calm off of just microdosing. And there's a guy that I know here in Chilliwack, and he actually just gave me their 3 tablets, and they're mushrooms, but they put nootropics in them, and there's a lot of vitamin D in there and everything, and they put like a bunch of stuff. And I took those 3 days in a row, and I got so much done, and I felt so calm and like so well thought out throughout the day that I want to just keep taking them, because I know how efficient I am on them, and I know I'm an overthinker, so it stops that. It makes my thought process slow down, and it makes everything so clear. Whereas then I'm not being like clouded by all these other thoughts in a day. It's like, and my day just becomes way more efficient. Which is the big benefit that it's had for me. And the overthinking when it comes to like anxiety, when it comes to all that kind of stuff, is hugely helpful. Right? If I can when we talked before, it's like I would take, like, say if I got home from work and I wanted to take my dogs out for a walk, I would put some in a protein shake with some berries and stuff, and I would take it. And when I was walking the dogs, I literally would have moments being like, I'm not thinking. Like, my mind isn't racing.
Yeah, that's presence.
Yeah.
It allows you to be present, right? Yeah, it kind of zeroes in your focus on, whatever task that you're actually doing. Like, I love microdosing too. I think there's benefits to both microdosing and macrodosing, and the benefits are just different. Like, I think typically, like, best way to microdose is usually 4 days on, 4 days off kind of thing, I'm pretty sure, if I'm remembering correctly. And yeah, same thing. Like, I'll just take a little bit before bed, and I sleep better. I dream better. I go deeper into REM sleep. It's like, I'll turn all my devices off, and I can just be, present and light some candles or whatever. And, but at the same time, like, like that's really great for mood. And, same thing like you, like focus, getting things done. Like, if I have to do a bunch of writing or something like that, a little bit of psilocybin, it's amazing. Right. But the macrodosing too, man, it's like there is something so powerful about surrendering. And when you take enough, you don't have a choice but to surrender to the experience. And that's where the benefit of that comes in, is this surrender. Like, even just hearing you talk about it, it's like that's what you sounds like you're struggling with is I'm not ready to surrender to the mushroom.
It's like the cold plunge.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I don't want to do it. It's something that I'm just like scared to do. It's like I also suck with cold water too.
Yeah.
Like I'm like I don't like making myself do things. Like it just sounds really stupid being like a bodybuilder and like an entrepreneur being like I don't like doing those things that seem unnecessary to make myself uncomfortable. Like like
suffering for the sake of suffering.
Yeah. So I had to get uncomfortable to open my own business. Like that was super uncomfortable. That was like years of being uncomfortable and like years of being like, oh, where's the next like lease payment coming from? Where is all this kind of stuff? But like to be like to look at a cold pool and being like, I'm just gonna get in that. I'd like for me, I'm just like,
why? Oh, I know that. I'm totally what you're saying. And you know what? There is like. Some other guy I follow was talking about this the other day, and that's what I meant by the suffering for the sake of suffering. It's like, what are you suffering for? Whatever you're suffering for should have some sort of benefit or be kind of like helping you work towards some kind of goal. It's like I definitely love to just like challenge myself, certain things like that. Like the other week, I did cold plunges up in Whistler. We did a hike and then did cold plunges, and it was freezing cold, and like it's awesome because you're like, okay, I conquered that. But it's like, you know, I feel like, especially with like weight training and stuff, like people get really addicted to like the idea of suffering but for no purpose other than to just kind of suffer. And it's kind of like a flex at the same time. And it's like, where is it getting you, you know?
Yeah. I kind of, okay, so I've had this thing, like I haven't really been involved in bodybuilding too much. Like I like with coaching, yes, but like in my personal journey, no. I went almost 2 years almost without working out, like maybe working out like 1 to 2 times a week, maybe. Like I remember, like I had gone like weeks without working out at all, and that's when I was like not doing well mentally. As I kind of got in that rut. But even since then, I haven't had that same like passion for it. And it's something that I remember having like these thoughts while I was doing it. And knowing I'm like I can't think that way, right? If I think that way, I'm gonna stop exercising. I'm gonna stop bodybuilding. I'm gonna stop lifting weights. But now I'm comfortable with that. So back then that was a big struggle. I'd literally be pushing as hard as I can to get as big as I can, eating as much as I can, and like doing as many performance enhancing drugs as I can, and like and doing all that stuff. And I was like, it was like this badass side of me, and it had like consumed like my life when it came to that kind of stuff. And then like just over the last, I would honestly say like 6 months to a year, is I see some of those people where it's become such an addiction. And I think that that's where I was at, because when I would sit there and I was lifting weights and I was going to the extreme and I would be lifting, I'm like, this is literally the stupidest hobby ever. I'd be like, I literally get excited every day to just pick up this piece of metal.
You know what's dumber than bodybuilding? Powerlifting. That's why I don't powerlift anymore.
Well, that's like same concept though. You know what I mean? And it's like,
jokes aside,
but it's like I just see so many people still on that route, and like it's amazing to have a passion. Like, and if you're going to have a passion, that's a great passion to have. But when it gets to the point where I can see now the negative aspects that it had on my life and the negative impact that it had on my life. Whereas then like I lived, slept, breathed bodybuilding, and I loved it. And I did, and I still do love the sport, and I like training the bodybuilding way. But when I see some of the people that even I used to train with, and how it's not even like, it's not conducive to anything. Like, it's not taking them anywhere. Like, their goal isn't to compete. Their goal isn't to do anything. But they're letting their whole like,
it's their whole identity.
Their personal life suffer. Their work life suffer. They're not going anywhere. The most exciting thing that they have in their day is that time that they go to the gym. Which, that's great. That's fine. That's the time where you go and work on yourself. But like, if you're going to train like an athlete for a sport, compete. Right? Like,
you need to have a reason for it.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's not my place to say what their why is, but I just know that like where I got to with it, where it was unhealthy. And like everything that I posted was always like angsty bodybuilding stuff, and like
just super like self-inflating. Like, dude, I've done that too. It's like, I mean, if you went and looked at my Instagram right now, it looks a little different. Like it last few months, things have been really put into perspective with me. You know, like we lost a couple of loved ones and that kind of stuff. And I was just like, you know, when people pass away in your life or anything kind of significant, you know, or like your dog, for example, recently passed, you know, it's like, that's something so important to you and really matters. Like those things really matter. It's just like the whole, you know, all these other things that don't matter become so apparent that they don't, and that you just sort of realize, you know, you're living your life in a way that doesn't even make any sense to you. And I think that's something a lot of people are going to go through over the next few years, because basically right now, and I think I know why people do that, is everything is about self-promotion right now.
Yeah.
It's just self-promotion. But self-promotion for what? You know, like we have this ability to, you know, experience fame, even though we haven't really earned the accolades to be famous. And so now it's just, how much content can I put out? You know, how many videos
how many likes can I get? How many views can I get?
You know, just, you know, day after day, you know, like rise and grind. It's like, I'm fucking love that stuff. Like I love working hard towards a goal. But, you know, when your life is just rise and grind to the gym, and then, like you're saying, everything else falls apart and doesn't go anywhere, like, you know, you're just going to be old gym guy, and all those things that you were pursuing, you know, are lost on you because it's just about self-promotion. And so for me, it's like, and with, you know, starting this brand pretty soon here, it's like, what is my why for all of this stuff? Like, why am I training?
Yeah.
You know, I don't powerlift anymore. You know, I do a lot more like functional stuff and stuff like that. Cause like, well, my passion is hunting. And so I want to be a better hunter. So I'm going to train to hunt. Right. And I've just, that means that I can't be obsessed with aesthetics anymore, because aesthetics and, you know, physical strength powerlifting takes away from all of the benefits of like rucking or cardio or all the other things that are applicable to my passion. But, you know, like even with just having a social media presence, you know, I deleted most of all of my political posts, because so much of that is just like, I'll go back and read it and try and think about the headspace that I was in, and I'll be like, was I in the headspace of trying to actually help people, or was I in the headspace of trying to sound important?
Yeah.
You know, trying to self-promote. Again, just self-promotion. It's what it all comes back to. Whereas, you know, if you're promoting your business because you want to help people be healthier and, you know, build a community at your gym, it's like, that's an awesome why to be doing something and to be promoting something. Yeah. But it's just like at the gym again, you know, rise and grind, you know, here's another photo of my ass and whatever. It's like nothing against whatever people are doing, but
when your identity is your ass, like it's
exactly. Yeah.
Great. I mean, I like ass, but it's like
everybody likes ass.
Everybody likes ass, but like if there is something behind, like if that is your identity, like, yeah. Anyway, for me as a business owner, and I think for you as you get into like Moss and Blood and whatnot, I think that culture is the most amazing thing that you can try to cultivate. Mm-hmm. It takes you out of it. You know, and you're trying to create this culture around your why and the things that you personally believe in. Mm-hmm. I think that when I opened the gym, I was really good at creating the culture even before I opened the gym, like when I managed like the corporate gyms and whatnot, which is why Pump House had the following that it did when it opened. But I was still the face of it. Mm-hmm. And there's actually a business guy in town. He owns a couple barber shops and whatnot. And he said, you want to be able to leave your thumbprint on your business without having to be there. Mm-hmm. Right? And so that's something I took to heart, and I had no clue how to do it. And I think it's just kind of like naturally taking its course now. Mm-hmm. But like, I've had people in the last 2 years being like, wow, you really fell off the map. Right? Like, and because on the Pump House pages, I wasn't posting myself constantly anymore. Mm-hmm. I wasn't posting anything. Because
that's the
I wasn't in the videos.
Right?
And like I felt like I'm coming out of being like the face of the business. Mm-hmm. However, business has been better than ever. The culture is still the same. The culture is still building, right? And
people at the gym see you.
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, I'm here less and less and less. Mm-hmm. Like I have staff now, and like I'm not here on like Saturdays. I'm not here Tuesdays generally. And it's like I'm here less and less, and I can focus on other aspects of it, but I've left my thumbprint. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And there's like all like clients, members who have been here forever is they all know that too. Like they all know the expectation of how people are treated here, and how people are supposed to be treated at the gym, and the workout expectation, the work ethic, and like right above the door it says we're here to become better. Like the gym is just an equal playing field for like everybody who walks through the door, because like it doesn't matter where you're at in your life, whether you're a 10-time Mr. Olympia bodybuilder or 10-time world champion powerlifter. You're here to improve your lifts, you're here to improve your physique. To the one person who's walking in for the very first time, they're here to take their first steps to improve themselves. So the gym is always going to be equal playing field for everybody to be on the same level. So when you walk in, everyone should be greeted. Like, fuck yeah, let's get that shit.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and that's the whole point of the culture behind what I'm doing. And it's like, I think it just took me a long time to figure that out, that I don't want to be the face of it. Right. I don't even like with my online training, like I get really uncomfortable, and like I'm supposed to, with my online, like I have a business mentor, and it's like, you have to do all the Instagram reels. You have to do what's trendy. You have to do all this kind of stuff. It's like, I get really uncomfortable sometimes because I know that I'm not authentically doing it.
That's why I don't do a lot of video, man. It's weird for me.
But I find these reels, I'm like, oh, I can make that really funny for this, and this. I'm like, but that's not me. I'm like, and that's not how I like approaching things. And it's like, I'd rather not make as much money now and be me than try to make like $50,000 a month and be something that I'm not.
100%. Yeah. I mean, like, here's the thing too, man. Like, people love authenticity, and they see it, even if they don't realize that they're seeing it, you know? Because, like, you know, with everyone, and, you know, specifically in the fitness industry, because I think the fitness industry is probably the worst for it, you know, everyone is trying to copy what everyone else is doing, because everyone has a 5-step program to succeeding in the fitness industry, and they're all selling it to each other. But, you know, if it, like you were saying, it's like every single person has a very unique take on everything. You know, that's why there's, I don't know how many freaking million podcasts out there, because there's so many people with so many unique opinions, every single person. But it's like, when it comes to authenticity, you know, like, for example, like a guy like David Goggins posts once a week. Because he's out grinding for 7 days a week. Yeah. You know, he doesn't care about, reels or content, or, you know, like keeping up with the algorithm, all these things. Like, he's out there doing his thing. And it's like, when people see that fucking post on Friday or whatever day of the week that he posts his running video, and he just gets you all jacked up, and then he fucks off for another 7 days. And it's like, that's a brand in itself. Just that, you know?
And he himself says how much he hates the social media. He hates that, but he has a responsibility. He's like, I have millions of followers on Instagram, and it would be a disservice of me and what I do and what I believe to not do that post, right? Because I know that people are believing in me, and I need to be walking the walk, and I'm doing this to inspire others to be better versions of themselves as well. And so
people need those people. Right.
Absolutely. I need those people.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like I've always said this, even with like my training, with anything that I've ever done on social media, whether I'm doing it the right way, whether it's more like ego based or whatnot, like back in the day when I was like bodybuilding and whatnot, like my whole goal was just to inspire one person. I've always said that if I can inspire one person to change their life, then all of this is worth it. Like 16-week preps is worth that one person, right? And I know that I've reached more than that now, but it's the same thing. With this podcast, if one person listens to it and gets one little thing out of it, if I cut a 30-second clip of something that I think someone could get something out of and post that as like its own little thing, I just hope that someone gets something out of it, and it's just like, even like helps change their mindset, helps in any way for them to move to that next stage of their life where like they are more open-minded, they are living more in their true authentic self, right? If you can get anybody even like a little tiny step closer to that just by saying one little thing, by talking about self-improvement, they're like, oh, I never thought of it that way. And it's just like, maybe they've heard the same concept talked about like 30 times. Like if you go on YouTube and you find like thousands of speeches that are all saying the same thing in different words.
Mm-hmm.
But like if you have that one way of saying it that connects with one person and it makes that light go off in their head, it's worth it.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, like, and people need different people to speak the same message to them. You know, like you're saying, like not everyone's gonna receive David Goggins' message, right? You know, the way that he speaks it. You know, that would maybe speak to guys like us who are, who need to be fucking yelled at to get riled up or whatever. But like maybe like a guy like Aubrey Marcus, it's like he's still promoting self-improvement, but it's going to be received differently by a different type of person. It's like you also can't underestimate like you yourself having your own podcast. You may be the guy that speaks to like the 15-year-old kid in the gym. Yeah, and that's like you're saying, like that helping one person, like that does change the world. Yeah. Because literally if every single person just helped one person per day, everybody would be getting help.
Yeah. Yeah. That's been my whole thing that I've always said. Like I said, whether I've been ego driven and in the bodybuilding world and posting abs and shirtless selfies and all that kind of stuff. It's like I've always made, like, even in the captions, I've always tried to make a point of making those captions matter, right? Rather than like posting a picture of like my ass and just posting like, keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
here's a picture of me bent over flexing my hamstrings.
And saying some like weird motivational one-liner. It's like I've always attempted to do something a little deeper in the captions, like whether I suck at social media, but like my whole goal is just to inspire a couple of people, and I know that I've done that, and I just want to like continue doing that. And I know that like same thing with you, like when you're in here, like you're a very positive, whether we're both introverted or not or whatever. It's like the way that we carry ourselves, and the way that we treat people, and the way that we can speak on podcasts like this, and just like say, hey, you know what, be kind when you're in those situations, and like I think that's what creates the impact, right? And it's like, yeah, we can call people dickheads, and some people are dickheads.
I am a dickhead.
We can all be dickheads, but it's it's like just like treating everybody like with kindness and whatnot, and that's the big thing. And then just trying to impact those lives where we can. It's like I know that if any of the little 15-year-old kids who are just getting into the gym in here ever ask you for a spot, you're a good person to come talk to. And like you'll never be like, no, I got a couple more swings I got to do with the kettlebell.
Yeah, man, because I was that kid, dude. Like, man, I was always just this scrawny, skinny little kid. And, I'd go to Great West and, back in like, mid 2000s, stuff like that. It's like you get screamed at for doing something wrong. It's like that fucking sucked. You're like, how awesome it would have been if some, guy that I looked up to or that was in really great shape or something like that came up to you. It was like, hey man, I was like, I don't want you to hurt yourself. Like, do you mind if I show you how to do that?
Yeah.
Like how much more impactful would that be?
Yeah, no, I've always, especially since owning the gym too, I would say I've always done it. But if anybody ever, especially like the young guys, if they're ever like, hey man, can I get a spot? It's like, just drop everything. Yeah. And and it's like, I like going and helping them. And then like, if they miss the lift or whatever, it's like, then you can be like, well, okay, so this is where you may end up getting this lift, and we might end up being able to do it today, but these are the little things you got to change, right? And then once they get that lift or they get it the next week or whatever, it's like they're so amped up and like they learn something. It's like those are the moments where you end up actually like changing people, 100%. Like changing their mindsets with how you treat them, and just genuinely helping them, But yeah, we are an hour and a half deep.
Sweet, man.
It went by really quick.
Yeah.
And I think this is a good place to call it. And I want to just say thank you so much for coming out and talking. And we should do this again sometime soon.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate you having me. And everybody should come check out the Pump House. Yeah. It's a great place to work out.
And where can we find Moss and Blood when it's ready?
Yeah, so this will probably be launched within a week or so. You can find me mainly at Moss and Blood, just MOSSAND Blood on Instagram. Or my personal one, which is just at Bronson Lee Norton. And I'll be doing a lot of promotion on there over the next few weeks and stuff like that. So,
and Moss and Blood, like on the logo that you have on there, it's like an arrowhead, but it's got an Olympic lifter. lifting a barbell right in the middle of it. So it's like, it's very outdoorsy fitness space.
Exactly. Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay. Thank you, Bronson. And yeah, cheers, everyone. Thank you so much.